Now, as we think about little steps, as we think about how we help people to progress on the journey, we need to recognize that in an ideal world, what you do is you take your mission statement and you divide it into its separate parts. So, for example, our mission statement was about helping children prepare for school, helping support parents in the arduous task of parenting, and showing and sharing the love of God. So it had three elements to it. Now, what we should have done, if we'd have known at the time, is take each one in turn and ask ourselves, what are the little steps that we need to put in place that will help children to prepare for school, and make sure that we understood what those were. We would then take parenting and say, what are the steps that we need to put in place if we're going to fully support the parents both in the group and from the group in terms of their daily lives, and the same in terms of their relationship with God. Now, that's what you do in an ideal world. But the reality is somewhat different, and we don't live in an ideal world, and therefore that isn't what we did when we began to think through these issues. Ours was far more haphazard. It was far messier, and it started with one idea, and then another idea was attached. Let me show you what I mean. What we should have done is draw a circle, and what I'm encouraging you to do is to draw a circle and put the name of your toddler group right in the center of the piece of paper. I'd really encourage you to do this as an exercise with your team in this session right now. Get a piece of paper, spread it out on a table, put a circle in the middle, and put the name of your group in the middle. And probably it's helpful as well to put at one side of the sheet of paper what it is that your thought through mission statement is. And if you've not had time to think about that, I'd encourage you to stop right at this point and spend as much time as is necessary working through what that toddler group mission statement, that goal, that target actually looks like for your group. And having done that, then come back to this exercise, because you'll find that helpful. So let me just describe what we ended up with as we began to use this exercise and as we began to plan for what our group might do in a very haphazard sort of way. The first thing that we decided to put in place was to develop a lending library. We lived in an area where literacy wasn't great, and we want to encourage our parents to read books with the children. And so we put in a lending library because we knew they probably wouldn't buy them for themselves. You may be in a very different setting, a very different context, and that may not be an issue for you, but it was certainly an issue for us. And so we put on some shelves a range of books. And the way we chose to do it was we chose to actually do and follow an 80-20 rule. So 80% of the books were books with good moral values that were really appealing to children, but weren't necessarily Christian. They weren't communicating Christian truths. And so they were books like Fireman Sam and Super Ted, or, and Postman Pat and things like that. And we had those books ranged on the shelves, and they could borrow them for a week, and then they brought them back, and then they could choose another one. And then we interspersed it with some Christian books. And we did that in order that they might have those that they could choose. Really good stories, really good children's stories, but with a Christian theme and flavour to them. And 80% of the books were secular, 20% of the books were Christian based and Christian themed. And then every week we would pick out a book and we would give a book recommendation, or we get one of the parents to say whether their child had really enjoyed the book and what it was in the book that they'd really enjoyed. And that encouraged other parents to actually take a book and use it in that way. And having established that for the children, we then decided that we'd do that for the parents as well. They were regularly asking us questions about life skills training and parenting things. And so we began to put in on the shelf really helpful self-help type books that were on a range of issues where parenting was concerned. And a number of those came from Care for the Family, which we always found really helpful and really supportive. So that's where we started, and that's what we looked to do first. And then having done that, we then did a tip of the week. So somebody stood up and they gave a top parenting tip that was short. It had to be about 3 minutes at the most, something that they had learned that they'd found really useful. And you could do it in one of two ways. You could either do it with somebody standing up and saying it. Usually the best time is when the kids are having refreshments and you can do news at that time, or by putting it on your weekly welcome sheet, or your news update, or even on your Facebook group if that's something that you've developed for your toddler group. And that's really helpful. And again, it's a little way that you can get stuff in that helps them in terms of child rearing and child development. And sometimes, somebody can ask a question about Christian faith, and you can say, our tip of the week is based on what Janet asked last week. She asked a question that I thought some others might be interested in us answering, and so here it is. So a tip of the week can be really helpful. And then we looked for church volunteers. Teams, from my experience, a toddler group team, it never has enough staff, and sometimes it's good to go out and get specific volunteers for specific jobs. And this is really important. The more you can have Christians within your group, the more you will lift the atmosphere into a place which is conducive to having the right conversations. And so go looking for church volunteers. Ask them to come and do something specific. Come and make the coffee, come and chat with the parents, come and do the welcome, come and put the toys out, whatever it might be. But don't expect them to do everything, because that will seem like too big a burden. And so we increased the number of our Christian volunteers within the context of the group in order to be able to have more influence. And then the next step was to develop social media and to develop a connection there. And that's proved to be really helpful during this period of COVID, and has proved to be helpful in terms of building relationship from the group out into people's lives and maintaining connection. And the reality is that we're maintaining connection not just with parents of the group now, but also with parents who've moved on along the next stage because their children have got older. And then there's free services. The opportunity to meet them at their point of need. One of my friends in her toddler group, they bring in a hairdresser, and the hairdresser offers free first haircuts. And they do it in a little room, and there's the opportunity there to actually use that as a connecting point. Another toddler group, the health visitor comes in and does the weigh-in for those parents just in another room but out of the group, and that's proved to be incredibly helpful both to the parents because it's a nice, warm, welcoming environment that they feel safe in, and it's been incredibly helpful for the health visitors in terms of being able to see quite a lot of parents and do the things that they need to do in an atmosphere that is, again, very welcoming and very warm. And the next step we put in place was pastors' visits. It's really helpful to encourage your church leader to come in for a coffee time visit. Now, in our instance, it was me. I was the toddler group leader and I was the pastor, so it was so easy for me to do. But I recognize that it's really important because it begins to make the connection from toddler group to church and vice versa, so that those within your group begin to think about this as their church and that person as their pastor. Now, many groups learn to pick their leader carefully. Don't presume that because the person is the church leader, they're going to be any good at coming in and mixing with your bunch. Pick one that is going to fit in and be able to do it well. It may not be the vicar, it may not be the pastor, it may be one of the church council, the parish church council, it may be one of the vergers or the deacons. It doesn't really matter who it is, as long as that person is appropriate and understands what it is that they're there to do. And that's really important. The next step was in terms of networking. See what other resources are in your church, your area, that can support you and your group members. Develop networks, develop partnerships. Let me give you an example. Our local library has someone who does a music and story time. They're employed by the local council. And so they come in to our group and do just that once a month. And they do it really well. We also run an event called Chomp, for those in food poverty, that actually provides them with a hot meal and fun and games for the kids during the holiday seasons. And so right the way through the summer holidays and at half terms and at the end of terms. And we've used that as a way of connecting the toddler group with Chomp and supporting those who would find that really helpful. We're building the local relationship. We're also building a relationship with our local health clinic, and we're looking to link Toddler Group with the nursery that also meets in our building. In fact, it's called Butterflies, so we are changing the name of our Toddler Group to be called, you guessed it, Caterpillars. And then the next thing that we put in place was to support local charities. You know, if you want to encourage kingdom values, if you want to help people make a journey towards faith, then one of the things that's really helpful to do is to help people to start thinking about others as more important than themselves. That's a kingdom value. So by supporting local charities that help children, which is the thing that people come to your group for, or national events like Children in Need, what we're doing is encouraging those values. Do you know, when my toddler group started to do this, one of the parents came up and said, you know, could we support Children in Need? And I said to them, yeah, that's great. I tell you what, whatever you raise, the church will match and double. And you know, that was really interesting. I didn't even ask permission, I suppose because I was the pastor at the time. And the first time they raised £100, so we made it £200. The following year they raised £200 and we made it £400. And the third year they raised £400, and then I had to go to the leaders and actually have a conversation about what it is that we were actually doing. But it showed that we were willing to sacrifice. It showed something that was really, really important. And then, of course, there's social events, isn't there? You know, they see the toddler group as a social initiative, an opportunity for them to make friends and interact with other mums and dads, and their kids to interact with other kids. And therefore, it's really important to build on the social dynamic of the group. Get to know them, get to know their partner, get to know their spouse, and to begin with, link them to an event or an initiative that the church is doing that is purely social. Say, raise money for your charity and do a social event that is helping to raise money for the charity. And if you can get the church involved in raising money for the same charity, then you can get people to begin to interact and to begin to mix. Or, for example, you could do something that is a bit off the wall. I mean, on one occasion, we did a thing called Pamper Night. You know, one of the things that mums particularly feel when they've just had a child is they don't feel very lovely, they don't feel very loved, they don't feel very, you know, pretty and things like that. And so we invited the mums to come along to a mums night, and it was purely about being pampered. So we had somebody who was good at massage therapy there. We had somebody that painted their fingernails, you know, somebody from the local nail bar. We went into a local nail bar and we said, how much if you would come and do it for a night? And we paid them to come and do it for a night. We did a thing called Colour Me Beautiful. We had a makeup artist in who actually just made them up, and all sorts of things like that were designed to make them feel special, important, as if actually we cared. Another way that we did it was we had a chef in the church. We were very fortunate. And so we would have spouses' dinners. And they would lay on a 3-course meal. They'd lay out table. They'd do silver service. And members of the congregation would come and they'd dress in, you know, white shirts and black trousers or black skirts. And really look the part and make them feel like they were special. And I'd come and do a sort of 6-minute after dinner speech, something that was funny. I mean, I think the best one I ever did was the mistakes that I'd made as a parent. And I tell some stories about mistakes I'd made as a dad. And do you know, the thing that was really interesting about it was that to begin with, they come in all cagey and, ooh, what are we coming to? And then they relax over the food. And then they get to the talk and they fully expected me to do something religious, something that sort of zapped them with the gospel. And then I'd stand up and tell them what a complete hash of a dad I was and the mistakes that I'd made. And they would roar with laughter. And they'd look at it and they go, well, at least I'm not as bad as him. And it would make them feel a little bit better about being a parent, being a dad. And then I'd end up with a sort of, what I'd learnt from the mistakes that I'd made, and how it's important not to take yourself too seriously. And then we introduced the toddler service. Notice we didn't do this as the first thing. We didn't jump right into the religious. We built up the relationship over time. But then we began to include a toddler service. And we did it 3 times a year. We did it Christmas, Easter and Harvest. And we planned for it. We planned for it to be as good as we could possibly make it to be. And then we began to offer a Thanksgiving service, a christening service. And this came purely by accident, really. One of the parents came up to me one day, and her son was called Peter, and he was the sort of thug of the group. He was the one who would run in and run over kids because he was a big lad, and go for the toddlers, the little tyke's car, and then defend it against all comers for the entire session. And his mum came up to me one day at the coffee hatch, and she said, "Would you do my Peter?" And I went, "Yeah, come on, bring it on!" And she laughed. And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "Oh yeah, that thing that you do as Christians, as church." And I went, "No, I don't know what it is that you mean when you go like this." She went, "That sort of dedication, christening thing." And I went, "Oh, wow, that's amazing. Yeah, I would love to do that." And I said to her, "Why don't we do it in the context of the group?" And she looked at me completely confused and she said to me, "Can you do that? Can you do that?" And I went, "As long as you don't tell anybody. But here's my suggestion. Why don't we do it in the group? We can have the morning group." We had 2 groups at the time. We could have the morning group stay on and the afternoon group come early, and we could do the service of Thanksgiving, dedication, whatever you call it, and then we could stay for lunch and we'll provide the lunch. And she went, "Oh, wow, that's fantastic." And we met on a Wednesday, and she said, "Oh, do you mind if I ask my partner?" She was one of these people who'd had kids before she'd thought about getting married, and that was okay. You roll with these things, don't you? And so she went away, and she came back the following Wednesday, and she went, "I'm really sorry, but we can't get the family together for that time. Could we do it at a weekend?" And I went, "Yeah, sure. When did you have in mind?" And she went, "I know it's a bit of an imposition, but could we do it on a Sunday morning at about 10:30, 11 o'clock? And I went, "Ooh, now you're asking. Don't know about that." I said, "I'll tell you what, I'll do it then on one condition. I can invite a few friends." You see, she had no understanding of church. She had no background in church. She'd never been in a church, didn't really know what it was. And when she turned up on the Sunday, the first thing she said to me was, "Man, you've got a lot of friends." Because she had no concept of what it was all about. And then we had a lot of fun together in the service, and we did the Thanksgiving, and we had her and a spouse out the front, and we said thanks to God for their beautiful child, and committed ourselves through the toddler group to support them as parents to this child. Now that's really important, isn't it? And you can do that. You can offer that through the group and see what comes out of it. But look at the timing again. It's not the first thing that we did. It's not the first thing that we offered. We built the relationships first. And then there's WLTDO. I wonder if anybody knows what that actually means. It stands for Who Let the Dads Out. My group began to think about how do we reach the spouses? They'd met the spouses through the spouses' dinners. And so they began to ask that question. And one of the suggestions was, who let the dads out? And Who Let the Dads Out is a great initiative. It's basically Toddler Group for dads on a Saturday morning. And if you want to find out more information about that, look it up on Google, Who Let the Dads Out. And there's a load of information and opportunity to be supported where that is concerned. Okay, so our next point and the next thing that we did was we didn't charge. We didn't charge for our group. In fact, actually, in the church that I served at the time, we didn't charge for anything that was outward faced and outward focused because we wanted people to ask the question, why is it that it's free? And we would say, because we've received the greatest free gift that you could possibly imagine. We just want to share it with you. And that would make them think and make them ask other questions. And so we decided that we weren't going to charge. This was a service of grace that we were providing for our local community. And it acted as a great conversation starter. And then we thought about offering pastoral support. How do we take the care that we're providing within the group and project it out into their homes? How do we meet them in their homes? And so we began to develop a pastoral support team that had the time and the inclination to go out and to visit in their homes. Now, by saying that, I'm not saying that you go and you spend 45 minutes in a house with some parent or other that you barely know. But what I am saying is you knock on the door, you ask them how they are, and maybe you hand them a sheet that tells them what we're going to be doing next week. It's just another way of connecting outside of the group, and it offers pastoral care. We began to explore that, and we began to expand that. And we had one of the parents in our group, her spouse, her partner, developed terminal cancer, very sad situation, quite young. And we began to offer childcare support. We began to offer, in the initial phase when he was still quite well, we'd take around a takeaway curry, or we'd provide babysitting that they might be able to go out together as a couple. And we just supported them through that really difficult time. Other things that you can do is you can see somebody who's really struggling and you can take flowers round, or you can recognize their birthdays, and instead of doing them in the group, take a gift round to the house to celebrate and give thanks for their birth and their birthday. Anything that shows extra care can be really appreciated and really helpful. And then, of course, you can run parenting courses. You can run courses that are designed to help those children develop and help the parents develop their parental skills. And Care for the Family do some absolutely fantastic courses where that is concerned. And I'd encourage you to think through how you do that. I know a group that actually does once a month. They do a session where they provide basically creche care for the kids while the parents go into another space where they can still see their children through the glass, and they do a parenting course, and they can go and do that if they like. And it's a great way of doing it in a non-threatening sort of way. And then you might consider the possibility of developing what you do by branching out into Messy Church and connecting your Messy Church right into what your toddler group is all about. And then one of the most difficult periods, I guess, for most parents is the 8-week holiday. Not only have they got their small children at home, but now they've got their big children at home. And just at the point where they need the support, they need the care, that's when the toddler group tends to close down. And so think imaginatively. Think about ways that you can actually continue to engage with those parents and those families. Maybe do a fun day, or do a teddy bear's picnic in the park, or maybe run a mini holiday club that is suitable for parents with toddlers. Create opportunity for continuing engagement through the summer months and the summer time. And then another church that I went to did annual taste services to introduce people to church, and it was the service that was designed with the toddler group in mind. In fact, actually, the toddler group led it, and it was low grade and it was low key. And it was a lot of fun. Or they did taste sessions, where they brought into the toddler group a couple of tables where people could come and they could sit round and they could talk about an issue that they were having with parenting, or they could come and see what other services the church had to offer. And by services, I don't mean on a Sunday. I mean other ministries, other things that they did that might actually meet them at their point of need. And then there's explore courses. There's Alpha, and there's Christianity Explored. those sorts of courses. But notice where that comes. It's right at the back end of the little steps that you're seeking to put in place. And you can do that either as a short course, a taster alpha that just does the first 3 or 4 sessions, or you could do it as the long course, and that can work really, really well. And all the while, with all of this, you are looking to go deeper in relationship and help them to go deeper in church and in faith. And the more you rub shoulders and they rub shoulders with credible Christians, the more faith is likely to rub off, because we need to remember, don't we, that faith is caught more than it is taught. Now, I need to tell you that all of those steps didn't happen overnight. We didn't draw a circle on a piece of paper, put them all in and implement them the next week. It doesn't work like that. That took something like 3 to 4 years to begin to develop. We had one idea and we implemented it, and then we built on that idea and saw the thing develop. But the little steps that we're talking about now are designed to act as a roadmap. As you plan them, it helps to point you in a certain direction, and they help you to pray with the goal in mind. Some of those plans had to wait until God brought into the team those who had the skills to make them happen. Others, they started out with as ideas, never came into being. It doesn't really matter. What it's providing is structure and direction and motivation and encouragement. And that's really, really important. Now, having said all of that, I want to pause again. And I want to give you the opportunity to spread out a piece of paper on your desk, put a circle in the middle with the name of your group in it, and then begin to dream dreams. Begin to put in all sorts of weird ideas, maybe some of the ones you've seen there, but you'll have your own ideas that will fit so much better with your group. And I'd really encourage you to do just that and see what you can identify as steps. It may be that you've already got steps in place. Well, put them in the circle, put the arrow out and put that thing there. And then think about how can we go from there to the next step, and think about what that actually looks like. So pause the video, give it some thought, and then we'll come back together in just a couple of moments. Okay, so that's not the only thing that we can do, and that's not the only little steps that we could provide. Those are deliberately designed to be out of your toddler group. But imagine for a moment that you decided to look at going deeper in a different way. Imagine that you decided that what you wanted to do was to go deeper into family, that you wanted to engage not just with those who attended your session, but those who were attached to those who attended your session. How do you go deeper into relationship with them? How do you build on the extended family? Increasingly, we need to recognize that we have to capitalize on the relationships we already have and allow them to lead us into relationships we haven't got at the moment. So for example, one church had a mechanic in the congregation. So in order to engage men, he brought an old banger onto the site. They had a car park around the back, and they invited the youth club to invite their parents to come and help restore it so that it could be given away to a single mum in the community. Now, that was a really interesting thing to do, because it was taking the skill set of one individual and using it as a mission opportunity. And not only were they teaching the youth how to mend cars, but they were giving an opportunity for the youth, the teenagers and their parents, their dads particularly, to engage with one another and interact with one another as they taught them and learnt together. And at the end, there was a goal, there was a sense of satisfaction in order to be able to give that away as a working concern to a single mum. And another church who let their dads out, and they used that as an opportunity to connect with the dads and reach out to the men and help them in their bonding with their own little ones. Another church did a thing called Jobs in July, and they asked people in the local community, particularly who were elderly or isolated, if they had any jobs that they needed doing around the house or in the garden. And they got together a team that would go out and do those jobs and create a bonding opportunity. One way to get them involved is to find out what the spouse or the grandparent does and see if you can invite them in to talk about it and use that as an opportunity. I know of one group who had a parent who iced wedding cakes as a sideline, and they asked her if she would do a slot in the group on icing your Christmas cake, and that went really well. Or a local hairdresser that came in and did cheap haircuts. Anything that will enable you to deepen the relationships and extend your influence and the influence of your group is really, really important. So what you're doing effectively is you're asking, how do we engage with a partner? How do we engage with the spouse? You're asking, how do we engage with the grandparents? How do we engage with the neighbors, maybe? If we do jobs in July, can we ask the members of the toddler group, have you got an elderly neighbour that lives near you that you have a relationship with that we can come in and support by doing something for them? That makes the neighbour look good, the parents that comes to your group, but it also builds relationship and deepens that relationship with the church. And then there's nannies and there's carers, isn't there? I remember going to one church on one occasion, and they were going, we're finding it really difficult to connect with the parents. And I said, why is that? And they said, because only the nannies come to the toddler group. It was in a very well-to-do area, very well-to-do. And each family had a nanny, and the nanny was bringing the kids. And they were going, it's so frustrating. They live in these gated communities. We never engage with their parents. It's really annoying. And I went, hang on a minute. Have you ever thought that God might be calling you to a ministry to, yeah, you guessed it, nannies? Well, it was like a light bulb went on. This woman looked at me as if she'd never thought about that. She'd never considered the possibility that that's what they should be doing. And she came to me at the end of the session and said, you've just completely changed my attitude towards the nannies and towards our toddler group. We're going to go back and we're going to make it a toddler group for nannies, not just, and hopefully through the nannies connect with the parents. What a great idea. And what a great change that actually was. And then there's their friends. You could do a bring a friend session and encourage them to bring a friend who maybe hasn't got kids at the moment but would like to come. And then there's there's siblings. Perhaps you can extend. Do a session that goes into the holidays so that the kids who used to come can come back and do something that is still connecting with them and connecting through your toddler group with church. So there's a whole range of ideas and thoughts as to how we might do just that. And that's it. That's the end of the session. Massive amount of information there, massive amount of stuff to consider and to think about. And I want to really encourage you to look at two things out of this session. Firstly, what is your vision? What is it that God is calling you to do? Be specific, be direct, break it down. What's the purpose of your toddler group? And then having established that, and it doesn't matter whether you come back and do session 2 in a week or a month or whenever it might be, this is the most important thing for you to do, to establish your goal, your target, your purpose. And then secondly, think about what little steps do we need to put in place over the next 2, 3, 4 years in order that we might realize our goal, our target, our purpose. So I'm going to leave you with that. Hope you found that helpful. And in the next session, we'll talk about how do we engage with community. But that's what we're going to do then. So thanks ever such a lot, and we'll see you next time.